The gym's fluorescent lights buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, but I barely noticed. My heart thundered louder, a drumbeat of panic and something else, something I couldn't name, as Javier's hand lingered on my shoulder. It was just a correction, a trainer's touch, but it burned through my skin, unraveling a truth I'd buried for years. I'm Marcus Tate, 28, a graphic designer who'd spent most of my life in Portland, Oregon, hiding behind sketchpads and deadlines. I wasn't the gym type, too lanky, too awkward, my black skin glistening with sweat. I was sure everyone noticed. But my best friend, Lena, had dragged me to Apex Fitness, swearing it would fix my soul. I didn't believe her, but I went anyway, desperate for something to drown out the noise in my head. That's where I met Javier Morales, 29, the trainer with a smile that could stop traffic and eyes that saw too much. He was Latino, built like he'd been carved from stone, with a buzz cut and a laugh that filled the room. He was everything I wasn't: confident, grounded, unapologetic. That day, 6 months into my membership, Javier was guiding me through a deadlift. My form was terrible, as usual. "Keep your back straight, Marcus," he said, his voice low, steady. His hand pressed against my shoulder, adjusting my stance, but it stayed there a beat too long. Our eyes locked in the mirror, and the gym faded away. No clanging weights, no grunts, just the weight of his gaze and the heat of his touch. I froze, my breath catching, because I knew what I felt wasn't just gratitude for a good trainer. It was something deeper, something I'd spent years running from. I'd grown up in a house where different wasn't a word you said out loud. My dad, a pastor, preached love but drew lines around it, lines I'd learned to tiptoe around. Being black and queer in a world that often rejected both felt like carrying a secret too heavy to lift. I dated women, played the part, but every relationship fizzled out because I was lying, to them, to myself. Javier's touch cracked that lie wide open. "Everything okay?" Javier asked, his hand dropping. His voice was casual, but his eyes weren't. They searched mine, like he'd seen the storm inside me and wasn't scared of it. "Yeah," I lied, grabbing my water bottle and turning away. But my heart was screaming, "No, nothing's okay. You just changed everything." That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, replaying the moment. Was I imagining it? Javier was straight, or at least I'd assumed he was. He had a girlfriend, didn't he? I'd seen him with a woman at the gym's holiday party, all smiles and easy affection. But that touch, that look, it wasn't nothing. I tossed and turned, torn between wanting to run back to the gym and never stepping foot in it again. The next morning I went back, not because I was brave, but because I was weak. I needed to see him, to know if I dreamed it. Javier was there, same as always, spotting a client on the bench press. But when he saw me, he waved me over, his grin wide but careful. "Ready to crush it today, Marcus?" he asked, tossing me a towel. I nodded, my mouth dry. We went through the usual routine, squats, pull-ups, planks, but every correction he made felt electric. A hand on my elbow, a nudge to my hip. Each touch was professional, precise, but my body didn't care. It was like he'd flipped a switch I didn't know I had. By the end of the session, I was a mess, my thoughts a tangle of fear and want. "Wanna grab a smoothie after?" Javier asked as I wiped down the equipment. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious again, like he was testing the waters. I hesitated. This was dangerous territory, but I said yes because apparently I was an idiot who wanted to drown in those eyes. We ended up at a juice bar down the street, a trendy spot with too many plants and overpriced kale. Javier leaned back in his chair, sipping a mango protein shake, while I fidgeted with my straw. "So, Marcus," he said, his voice dropping low, "you ever gonna tell me what's going on in that head of yours?" I laughed, but it came out choked. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his gaze pinning me in place. "You've been different lately, quiet, like you're carrying something heavy. Wanna share the load?" I wanted to. God, I wanted to, but the words stuck in my throat. How do you tell someone you're falling for them when you're not even sure who you are? Instead, I mumbled something about work stress and changed the subject. Javier didn't push, but the way he looked at me said he wasn't fooled. Over the next few weeks, our sessions became something more. Not just training, but conversations, real ones. He told me about growing up in East LA, about his mom's tamales and his dad's old boxing gloves. I told him about my art, about the sketches I never showed anyone. We laughed, we teased, we got too close. And every time his hand brushed mine, I felt it. A spark, a promise, a warning. One evening, after a late session, we ended up in the park near the gym. The air was crisp, autumn leaves crunching under our feet. We sat on a bench, the city humming in the distance. Javier was quiet, his usual energy dialed down. "Marcus," he said finally, his voice soft, "I need to tell you something." My heart stopped. I knew that tone. It was the sound of a truth about to break free. "I'm not straight," he said, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I've known for a while, but I didn't know how to say it. Not to my family, not to anyone. Until you." The world tilted. I stared at him, my mind racing. Javier, the guy who seemed so sure of himself, was just as scared as I was. I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice was gone. Instead, I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched his arm. He looked up, and for the first time I saw him, really saw him. Not the trainer, not the confident guy, but the man who was just as lost as me. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. That touch, that moment was enough. But it was also the beginning of something I wasn't ready for, something that would haunt me long after that day. The park became our refuge. After that night, Javier and I started meeting there after sessions, away from the gym's prying eyes. We'd sit on that same bench, the one with "Love Finds a Way" carved into it, and talk until the stars came out. It was innocent at first, stories about our lives, our dreams. I told him about the comic book I wanted to create, a story about a black superhero who didn't have to hide. He told me about his dream to open his own gym, one where everyone felt safe, no matter who they were. But the air between us crackled with unspoken tension, a pull we both felt but didn't name. I was falling for him hard. Every laugh, every glance, every accidental brush of his hand against mine made it harder to pretend this was just friendship. But I was terrified. I'd spent so long denying this part of myself, and now here was Javier, tearing down my walls with every smile. I didn't know how to be this version of me, the one who wanted him, who wanted us. One night, under a sky bruised with clouds, Javier took my hand. Not a casual touch, but a deliberate one, his fingers lacing through mine. "Marcus," he said, his voice rough, "I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this. Do you?" My throat tightened. I wanted to say yes, to shout it, but fear clawed at me. What if this was a mistake? What if I wasn't ready? But his eyes, dark and steady, held me like an anchor. "Yeah," I whispered. "I do." He smiled, a small, fragile thing, and leaned closer. Our lips met, soft at first, then desperate, like we'd both been starving for this. The world didn't end. No one shouted slurs from the shadows. It was just us, two men kissing in a park, claiming a moment that felt like defiance and salvation all at once. But the world doesn't let you have moments like that without a fight. The next day at the gym, I noticed people staring. Not blatantly, but enough to make my skin crawl. A guy named Trent, a regular with a loud mouth and a Confederate flag tattoo, muttered something to his buddy as I walked by. I didn't catch the words, but the tone was venom. Javier noticed too. His jaw tightened, but he kept his cool, guiding me through our session like nothing was wrong. Afterward, in the locker room, Trent cornered me. "You and Javier seem real close," he said, his voice dripping with insinuation. He was in his 30s, white, with a build that screamed steroids and a smirk that screamed trouble. "Careful, man. People talk." I froze, my towel clenched in my fist. "We're just friends," I said, hating how weak it sounded. Trent laughed, low and mean. "Sure. Keep telling yourself that." I didn't tell Javier about it. Couldn't. He was already carrying enough, and I didn't want to add to it. But the encounter stuck with me, a splinter under my skin. I started noticing other things, whispers, sidelong glances. The gym, once a sanctuary, felt like a minefield. Javier sensed the change in me. One evening, as we walked through the park, he stopped and turned to me. "What's going on, Marcus? You're pulling away." I wanted to tell him about Trent, about the fear gnawing at me, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I kissed him, hard, hoping it would say what I couldn't. He kissed me back, but when we pulled apart, his eyes were clouded with worry. "I don't want to lose this," he said quietly, "but I need you to be honest with me." "I'm trying," I said, my voice breaking. It's a lot." He nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. We didn't talk about it again that night, but the distance between us grew, a crack widening with every unspoken fear. A week later, things got worse. I was at the gym, finishing a set, when my phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Check the gym's online forum." Now, my stomach dropped. I opened the link she sent, and there it was, a thread titled, "Apex Fitness Going Woke?" The posts were a mix of speculation and vitriol, with anonymous users hinting at inappropriate behavior between a trainer and a client. No names were mentioned, but the details were too specific to be coincidence. Someone had seen us in the park. Someone was talking. I showed Javier the thread later that night. His face hardened as he scrolled through the comments. "This is bullshit," he said, tossing the phone onto the bench. "They don't get to do this to us." But they were doing it, and I didn't know how to stop it. I felt exposed, like my soul had been ripped open for the world to judge. Javier was braver than me, ready to fight, but I was drowning in shame. I'd spent so long hiding, and now the world was forcing me to choose. Stand up or run. I didn't want to run, but I didn't know if I was strong enough to stand. The gym became a battlefield. Every session felt like walking through a storm, with whispers and stares cutting deeper than any weight I lifted. Javier kept his head high, his trainer persona unshaken, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was fighting for both of us, and I was letting him down. I started skipping sessions, making excuses about work. The truth was, I couldn't handle the scrutiny. The forum thread had grown, with new posts every day, some calling for Javier's job, others spewing hate I couldn't unsee. I felt like a coward, hiding behind my phone screen while Javier faced the fire. One night, he showed up at my apartment, unannounced. His jaw was set, his eyes blazing. "You can't keep doing this, Marcus," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "You're shutting me out." "I'm not." I lied, but my voice cracked. I sank onto the couch, my hands shaking. I don't know how to do this, Javi. Everyone's watching us, judging us." He sat beside me, close but not touching. "Let them judge. I don't care. I care about you." His words hit like a punch. I wanted to believe him, to be as fearless as he was, but the weight of my past, of my dad's sermons, of a lifetime of hiding, was crushing me. "What if they fire you?" I asked. "What if this ruins everything?" "Then we fight," he said, his voice fierce. "We don't let them win." I looked at him, this man who'd chosen me despite the cost, and something in me broke. I leaned into him, my forehead against his shoulder, and let myself cry. He didn't say anything, just held me, his arms a shield against the world. But shields don't stop every blow. The next day, I got a call from the gym's manager, Sarah, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who'd always been fair. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said. Her tone was neutral, but it sent ice through my veins. I met her at the gym's office, a cramped room filled with protein shake samples and schedules. She didn't waste time. "There's been complaints," she said, folding her hands on the desk, "about you and Javier. People are saying it's unprofessional." My stomach churned. "It's not like that," I said, but the words felt hollow. "We're not doing anything wrong." She sighed, her eyes softening. "I believe you, but perception matters. I'm getting pressure from members, from corporate. I need you both to keep things professional here. Okay? No more park meetups." I nodded, too stunned to argue. When I told Javier, he was furious. "They're policing our lives," he snapped, pacing my apartment. "We're not breaking any rules." But we were, in a way. We were breaking the unspoken rule of being invisible, of not making waves. And the waves were crashing now. The next week was torture. Javier and I kept our distance at the gym, sticking to trainer-client mode, but it felt like betrayal. Every time I saw Trent smirking or heard a whisper, I wanted to scream. I started sketching again, pouring my anger into jagged lines and shadowed faces. One drawing, a superhero standing alone against a storm, felt too raw, too real. I hid it in a drawer. Then came the night that changed everything. Javier texted me to meet him at the park, late, after the gym closed. When I got there, he was waiting on our bench, his face lit by the glow of a street lamp. "I'm done hiding," he said, standing as I approached. "I'm telling Sarah tomorrow. I'm coming out, officially. And I want you with me." My heart stopped. "Javi, it's too much. They'll fire you. Or worse." "I don't care," he said, stepping closer. "I love you, Marcus. I'm not ashamed of that. Are you?" His words hung in the air, a challenge and a plea. I wanted to say I wasn't ashamed, that I loved him too, but fear choked me. I thought of my dad, of the gym, of the life I'd built on lies. "I need time," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Javier's face fell, but he nodded. "Okay, but I'm not waiting forever." He walked away, leaving me alone with the carved words on the bench. "Love finds a way." I wanted to believe it, but all I felt was loss. I didn't sleep that night. Javier's words echoed in my head. "I love you, Marcus. Are you ashamed?" I wasn't ashamed of him, but I was ashamed of myself, of my fear, my silence. I'd spent so long running from who I was that I didn't know how to stop. The next morning I called Lena. She'd always been my rock, a 27-year-old photographer with a knack for seeing through my bullshit. I told her everything, the park, the kiss, the forum, Javier's plan to come out. She listened, then said, "Marcus, you've got two choices. You can keep hiding or you can fight for him. But you can't do both." She was right, but it didn't make it easier. I went to the gym, my stomach in knots. Javier was there, training a client, his smile professional but strained. I wanted to pull him aside, to tell him I was ready, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I worked out alone, my thoughts a mess. That afternoon, Sarah called Javier into her office. I waited outside, my heart pounding. When he came out, his face was unreadable. "They're suspending me," he said, his voice flat. "Pending an investigation. Someone filed a formal complaint." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "Trent," he said. "He's saying I'm making clients uncomfortable. It's a lie, but they're taking it seriously." Rage surged through me, hot and sharp. "We can fight this," I said, echoing his words from before. "We can tell the truth." Javier shook his head. "I'm done fighting their game, Marcus. I'm telling Sarah everything. About us, about who I am. If they fire me, fine. But I'm not lying anymore." He walked back into the office and I followed, uninvited. Sarah looked surprised but didn't stop us. Javier stood tall, his voice steady. "I'm gay," he said. "Marcus and I are together. If that's a problem, fire me. But I'm not hiding." Sarah blinked, processing. "Javier, no one's firing you. But we need to address the complaint. Can you keep things professional here?" "I always have," he said, his eyes flashing. "The problem's not me. It's people like Trent who think they can bully us into silence." I stood there, silent, my heart screaming at me to speak. But I didn't. I let Javier carry the weight, again. When we left the office, he didn't look at me. "I need space," he said, and walked away. I felt like I'd been gutted. I'd let him down again. That night, I went to the park, to our bench, and sat there until dawn. I thought about my dad, about the sermons that had made me feel small. I thought about Javier, about the man who'd shown me what it meant to be brave. And I thought about myself, about the man I wanted to be. The next day, I did something I'd never done before. I went to my dad's church. Not to confess, but to confront. He was in his office, preparing a sermon. "Dad," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "I'm gay, and I'm in love with someone. I need you to know that." He stared at me, his face a mix of shock and sorrow. "Marcus, you know what the Bible says. I know what love says." I cut in. "And I'm done hiding." He didn't hug me. He didn't say he was proud. But he listened, and that was enough for now. I left the church feeling lighter, like I'd shed a skin I'd outgrown. I went straight to Javier's apartment. When he opened the door, his eyes were wary, but I didn't let that stop me. "I'm sorry," I said. "I was scared, but I'm not anymore. I love you, Javi, and I'm ready to fight for us." He didn't say anything at first, just pulled me into his arms. We stood there, holding each other, and for the first time I felt free. Javier's suspension lasted a week, but it felt like a lifetime. We spent those days together, not hiding anymore. We walked through Portland streets, hand in hand, ignoring the stares. We talked about the future, his gym, my comic, a life we could build together. It wasn't easy, but it was ours. When Javier went back to work, Sarah called a staff meeting. She laid down the law. Apex Fitness was a place for everyone, and discrimination wouldn't be tolerated. Trent didn't show up that day or ever again. Rumor was he'd left town, his complaint dismissed for lack of evidence. I didn't care. He was gone and we were still here. But the whispers didn't stop completely. Some members left, uncomfortable with the new vibe. Others stayed, and new ones joined. People who saw Javier's courage and wanted to train with him. The gym started hosting inclusivity workshops, and Javier led the first one, his voice steady as he shared his story. I sat in the back, sketching him, my heart swelling with pride. My dad and I started talking again. Slowly. He didn't understand, not fully, but he was trying. That was more than I'd expected. Lena, true to form, threw us a coming-out party at her loft, complete with rainbow cupcakes and a playlist of queer anthems. Javier laughed until he cried, and I fell in love with him all over again. One evening, months later, we went back to the park, to our bench. The carved words were still there. Love finds a way. Javier traced them with his finger, then looked at me. You ever think about what comes next? He asked. All the time, I said, taking his hand. But whatever it is, I want it with you. We kissed, the city lights twinkling around us, and I felt it. The weight of fear lifting, replaced by something stronger. Hope, love, the courage to be myself. That moment in the gym, when Javier's hand lingered on my shoulder, had changed everything. It had forced me to face my truth, to fight for it. And what happened after, the pain, the fear, the joy, still haunts me, but not in the way I expected. It haunts me like a song you can't stop humming, a reminder of who I am and who I love. We're still here, Javier and I, building a life in a world that doesn't always understand. But we're not hiding anymore, and that's enough.